I want to flip it over a little bit to the offensive side of the ball. We're here with Larry Hawley here on Sports Talk Chicago because, as you mentioned, if the Chicago Bears have a defense that is 7-12, maybe in late May to some Bears fans hearing that right now, that doesn't sound like much. I think that is significant because what the Chicago Bears have always had is a one-dimensional unit. Outside of 2013 when their offense was good, every other year it's mostly been about that defense. So if you have a 7-12 in the NFL unit and you just give me middle of the road offense for the Chicago Bears, I think you've got a really competitive team. And I think you also have a playoff team. I want to ask you a little bit about Caleb Williams, and I want to phrase it like this because what I appreciate about you so much is that you are, and not just a Chicago history buff, but you are a sports history buff too as well. And what I've been trying to get across to Bears fans is I think that we have an affliction in this town with the quarterback. I'm not saying anything that's new, but is it fair to also posit that now with Ryan Poles and what they're trying to build here with the selection of Caleb Williams, #1 overall, is it fair to say to Bears fans that we have to put the past behind us? The Mitch Trubisky, the Justin Fields, the Jay Cutler, the Cade McNown, the Rex Grossman. It seems like a flat time is a flat circle or a wheel that keeps on spinning. Is it fair to say that maybe we should put our past preconceived notions about Bears quarterback play behind us and try and look at this with fresh eyes with Caleb Williams and talk a little bit about what you like about the selection of Caleb Williams for the Chicago Bears?
And I think history is a powerful thing. We saw that with the Cubs for so many years. I think history can be there. It may, I remember, I forget who it was. Somebody said, it may not be a curse, but certainly the weight of history can be there. We've seen with the Bears the weight of history when it comes to quarterbacks. We've seen it firsthand just recently. I think really what was interesting and telling to me was the incredibly strong reactions that you saw when it came to Justin Fields. It came to who did they want? Did you want Caleb Williams? Did you want Justin Fields? It was really stunning to see the incredible social reaction, almost anger and fighting, things you really didn't see. Now, of course, the social media age, we're not really in a long age, but the incredible divisions within the fan base and just, how nasty it got at times. It just shows how much the quarterback position and the lack of the Bears being able to have consistency at that position has really haunted the franchise. We can go back years upon years, with Jim McMahon, who had that chance to be consistent. He couldn't stay healthy. The health was a big thing for him. You go through the 1990s, you have Tom Zach, you have Harbaugh, you have Steve Walsh, you have Eric Kramer. Then you get into the Stenstroms, the Morenos. Then you go ahead and you get the Jim Millers and the Chris Chandlers. You had Henry Burris. You had Cordell Stewart. People forget about Cordell Stewart was a Chicago Bear. Jonathan Quinn. Then, of course, you get Rex Grossman. And you have what I consider to be maybe the greatest 6 weeks of quarterback in Bears history in '06. And then he completely falls apart. And then the Super Bowl, he has a terrible game. And then you have Kyle Orton. And then you get Jay Cutler. And Cutler was, I think, a very effective quarterback. I think very easy to make the claim he's the best quarterback in Bears history. But, he had some troubles with consistency, not aided by the fact that the Bears are switching offensive coordinators every couple of years. So he's gone. Then you draft Trubisky. You overreach to go get him, and he does not pan out. You don't have the system in place to make that work. Nagy has this first year. It's funny, you mentioned that if the Bears can just have a middle-of-the-road offense and a good defense, maybe you do that. Right now, with not knowing much about Williams, understanding his talent, but understanding, and understanding the guys around him, what they're building, I've often said for the Bears, they're kind of a playoff line team right now. Probably I saw a projection that they were 13th in the league. That's probably fair. That would be about right around the playoff line. Williams has a tremendous amount of talent. I like the fact that he's a character. He's a unique guy. I find that especially telling in sports. I like that. He has his own flair. He does the bear claw, which I think people are excited about. He's shown incredible talent in what he can do. He's shown the ability with Rome to already build a little bit of chemistry. I think that it's something, I think he has a chance to be a special player. And he has incredible talent, enough to the point where I think Poles did distance himself from a quarterback that I think he respected, and a quarterback that maybe he thinks has a second level. I think he has a second level. And I think Justin Fields is going to go to a place that's going to give him every opportunity to do that while he learns behind a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Russell Wilson. He's had a couple of rough years, but again, he's a guy who knows how to win. I'm excited about Williams. He has tremendous talent. and it will be up to the Bears coaches to get the most out of that talent. Sometimes talent can rise above that. Sometimes it can't. I've always said that I thought Andrew Luck had the great fortune. Now, Andrew Luck, tremendous quarterback, tremendous talent, had the great fortune to work with Bruce Arians his first year. Obviously, Bruce had to step in when Chuck Pagano got sick, but Bruce Arians was, his own guy. Worked with Manning, worked with all those guys. I think of other quarterbacks who've done it. Cam Newton had tremendous success, although he had to start with a team that was really struggling. That Panther team was not good at all. The Bears and Williams is going to have the opportunity that the Bears are not rebuilding. This would be a Bears team that landed in the bottom of the top 10. We're not in playoff conversation really much at all last year. Because of that bad start, they were playing catch up and didn't do enough in December to really be there. So there's a lot of advantages for Williams. He's got 3 great receivers in Allen, Moore, and Odunze. I really think that he's going to have every chance to succeed here. And I really think that Caleb has the talent. He has the moxie. I think that's important for a quarterback. And it seems like he has the attitude. I'm really excited to see what he's going to bring, because if he's able to be that quarterback in Chicago, I can't really think of a greater thing other than getting the Cubs to a World Series, although the Bears have now gone so long without a Super Bowl and have gone so long without a consistent quarterback. If Caleb Williams is really able to do that, become a consistent All-Pro, MVP, and most importantly, lead the Bears to a Super Bowl, you're talking about a guy who goes, is in the pantheon of Chicago sports. Maybe he even put him on the Rushmore if he gets really, 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 really good. So yes, history is part of it. History is something you reflect on. We are, we're not doomed to repeat history, but we sure as heck never forget it. That's just part of how it goes. So I think the history is there. Williams has as good of a chance to break that as anybody else has had. Now it's up to them to do it, and for those around Williams to support him as well. It's really hard to do it all by yourself, and he's going to need that help to do it.
Yeah, it's just for me, look, just being around it long enough, I'm just one of the easiest fallback lines that a Chicagoan can throw out there is that, the Bears, they ruin the one quarterback, they'll ruin the next guy. You know what I mean? It's the old, It's like the old McCaskey, narrative that keeps going back and forth, that they'll always continuously screw it up. I think this time is a little bit different. I think you're bringing up such a great point that I think the tangibles of Caleb Williams' play on the field and the intangibles of what he's shown personality-wise off the field made this decision almost pretty cut and dry and easy for Ryan Poles. And as much division as there was on social media, and trust me, Larry, I saw that on the daily. Once it happened, I think just who Caleb is has made that transition to move on to him a little bit easier. My thing, though, is that I don't know what it is, and maybe this has to do with my history as loving and falling out of love with Chicago Bears quarterbacks, is I feel so very protective of Caleb Williams. That honestly, I know that he is still a rookie quarterback. You mentioned Andrew Luck. You had his bumps in the road the first month of the season. Everyone wants to talk about C.J. Stroud, but Brendan Shagru so aptly last week said, C.J. Stroud started the season 0-2. So if Caleb Williams starts this season 0-2, I just don't want to see Bears fans' brains melting on social media and in this town that I now live and love. So I'm having a little bit more cautious optimism about the non-linear road that Caleb Williams is going to have performance-wise as a Chicago Bear. So I will ask you this. There was an ESPN article that came out that had, I believe, Caleb Williams projected to have 26 total touchdowns this year. And a lot of people, for fodder or just having fun with it, are asking themselves, can Caleb Williams break the Bears franchise passing touchdown record as a rookie, which is still 29 from, as you mentioned, Eric Kramer. So I'm going to put this number at 26.5 total touchdowns. If you were taking the over-under just right now with Caleb's output, are you leaning over? Or are you leaning under on that right now?
Part of me wonders if you might go over, because I just think that, I think they're going to try to throw the ball here a little bit. I might actually go over, and maybe that is a little bit of optimism, but he does have enough weapons around him. I think they've done a good job. Key's going to be seeing how that offensive line comes together. I'm really curious to see Bates, if that's where they go with center, which it seems like they are. The line's kind of there. You've got Braxton Jones, who's out there, on the tackle spot with Wright. I'm really curious to see how the line develops, because that's been something, and I think they've got something going. And God bless Tevin Jenkins, who 2 years went from the trading block to now being one of your foundation guys. So
indispensable. Yeah.
Yeah. Funny how that happens. But he's got every shot to do it. With Swift being added in the backfield, I think that's another fantastic addition. Roshan Johnson's an interesting guy. I want to see what they do there. And of course, you've got Herbert. He's got stuff around. You know what? I think I would go over. And you know what? There's going to be mistakes. He could. Even last year, I was telling people that, in my mind last year, the decision point for the Bears was going to be the last 8 games of the year, because I felt like they were still trying to figure stuff out. So personally, when how the Bears performed the last 8 games was not quite the best case scenario, but they were certainly better. And you saw stuff out of the defense that was there. They beat the Lions once. They should have beat them twice, but unfortunately they couldn't quite get the job done. I think you certainly saw, especially in the last 2 home games, the Bears had ascended past that lower level of team. They had jumped up. They had taken that leap up to go. They had taken. They were no longer the bottom feeders. They had moved their way up. So I think this year is going to be the same thing in some respects. You've got a weird 3-game AFC South slate to start. You've got a lot of division games stacked in the back, which usually happens. It's a little bit of a peculiar schedule. So I think it's going to be a little bit up and down. I think it would be great if the Bears had great defense early and were able to maybe get a couple of wins. I do wonder if they're going to be a hard charging team at the finish. And that could be what it is. I think of Andrew Luck's season. They started that year 1 and 2, and then they come back. And you speak of bumps and bruises, and yes, Andrew took a bunch of them. And unfortunately for him, I think that probably led to his career being much, much shorter than I'm sure he and of course, all football fans would have liked. But I do think there is going to have to be patience. But what is patience? Patience doesn't exist. We've seen that. And there isn't. And last year, you know what I said? Last year, I knew the Bears were probably going to struggle early. They had the worst start you could possibly imagine. Coaches getting fired, blowing a 20-point lead, getting waxed by the Packers in the second half in that opener. That was about as worst a scenario. And then they go and play the Chiefs and look hapless.
I was going to say Kansas City on the road week 3. We all looked at that months before, when the schedule came out, and we said that's a loss. And that's a loss. That was going to be a difficult road to host. So I'm with you on that one. And yeah, you're bringing up again, division stacked at the end of the year. The final 8 games, if you want to look at it like that, obviously all 6 of those are going to be against division opponents. And I'm kind of with you, just the way that the schedule is kind of stacked up, just the type of offensive lines that this team is going to be playing. And when we talk about defensive line as a concern for the Chicago Bears, I think we are going to get a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde type team at times this year, a team that can maybe rip off a little win streak, but also maybe put a losing streak together just as easily. So that's a little bit where my hesitancy is with this team right now.
Yeah, and that's why I think probably I think you and me and we've seen it. They're right around the playoff line. So what's playoff line? 9-8, 10-7. Could they do that? Sure. I think that would be fair. I think if he came out, and I know some people were saying the Bears will win 10 games last year. I thought that was very optimistic. I pinned them between 6 and 8. And that's about where they landed. And that included, I thought, a fairly good charge at the end. I thought that the goal last year, if they could get there, was to go into December and at least be in the playoff conversation. They really were not there. I mean, I know that they a little bit late. They really weren't there at that point. Had they beaten Detroit, of course, you can always say for a lot of games, they beat the Broncos early on. And, maybe if they'd beaten Detroit, it would have been a little bit more, fiery. I don't think they made it to the last week still alive in the playoffs. I think they were eliminated.
No, we were in the graphic. We were in the bottom. I was wondering part of that graphic for a couple of weeks, but we didn't make it to the end of the year on that.
And it wasn't really a true thought. It never really crossed anybody's mind. Pretty much after October that was going to happen. But again, I think it's there's a lot there, and I think it will be if they start 0-3, people will panic. I think for me, again, it's depending on what that defense can do early. Can they keep you in some games? And if you're able to do that, maybe instead of losing, and if the offense can be okay, let's just say maybe you have 4 or 5 close games to end the year, maybe you end up going 3-2 instead of going 2-3 or 1-4. And that can make a significant difference. And I always think one thing, I've always kind of made this for a building team, and I had it for the Colts of 2012 when they went from winning 2 games to winning 11. The key for the Bears is to win the games against the opponents to whom they are like, those middle games, those games in which they're playing teams like the Vikings, the Titans, not really the Texans, because the Texans were kind of upper echelon.
Cardinals, Commanders.
Come on, exactly. Those are those teams in the middle, kind of stacking. If you're thinking of it as a race, they're kind of trying to get there. If the Bears can have a good record in that category, just like the Colts did in 2012, that's kind of a study for me for years of breakthrough. I think that can be something that's really significant for the Bears, because then all of a sudden you go from being maybe a fringe playoff, maybe you're in the wild card graphic there in the final 2 weeks, to where maybe you go into the final 2 weeks and you have 9 or 10 wins, and then you can maybe battle for a little position. And if the division doesn't pan out, maybe you're playing for a division title and you get a chance to play at home. All these things are factors, but I think looking at the season right now, if the Bears, you're going to have some ups and downs, but if the Bears defense can find themselves, and let's just say they get another defensive end at some point, maybe they do something. Maybe you get a surge like you saw in 2018 where, hey, suddenly it's the end of September. The Bears are the best defense in the league. And you're starting to think big. And obviously you could think big that year with what they were able to end up doing. But we'll see. And again, you just don't know what's going to go into a season. But if people overreact, that's part of it. There's a lot of passion that we've seen, as we mentioned again, when it came to this quarterback decision, always going to be there for the Bears. So could there be inconsistency? Sure, probably to expect it with a rookie quarterback. But if that defense can rise to the challenge, then maybe in that inconsistency, you pull out a couple of these victories that allow you then to be able to play playoff football in January.
Yeah, and keep in mind that Carolina Panthers trade is still ongoing. They still have their second-round pick next year. Ryan Poles has traded second-round picks past 2 seasons. One was not so great, Chase Claypool. The other one was great with Montez Sweat. He could easily do that again this year for middle of the season reinforcements. So we'll just have to see how it goes.